You know, for politicians, it could be the thing that always trips them up now and then, the pay for play, that they got some money and use the influence of their job, and they're usually caught with the money, and a lot of it. The thing that happened, though, in former Alabama Governor Don Siegelman's case is that we sent to jail the same case that put Health South founder and CEO Richard Scrushy to jail over a $500,000 payment made to the state of Alabama that would be part of a hospital fund, a medical fund that he would oversee, that Scrushy would oversee. Here's the thing, though, that the Alabama Democratic governor didn't personally see a penny of that. He didn't have any bag with loot in it. Nevertheless, he spent 7 years in the slammer for something that he says he never did, and for which there were no proven rewards personally to him. Well, he's out now, and he has every reason to be furious now, but he's just trying to make sure none of this happens again to anyone else, Democrat or Republican. The former Democratic governor of the state of Alabama, Don Siegelman. Governor, very good to have you.
Oh, thank you, Neil. It's been a little over 5 years since we've had a conversation.
Incredible.
And that's because I have been in prison.
Incredible.
So I had an excuse for not coming on your show.
I understand. Although we've talked to the big wigs in prison before. Dennis Kozlowski comes to mind. I'm not trying to compare you to the former Tyco boss, but I am trying to get a handle around this, because normally when they send a former bigwig such as yourself to jail, they've got the goods, and the goods apparently on you was that you personally profited from this relationship with the former Health South CEO Richard Scrushy. He wanted to play on a hospital trust in your state, and he gave you money to do that. But he didn't give you money personally. You got no personal reward out of this. So what happened?
Well, actually, he didn't want to serve on the board, and he didn't give me any money. It was a campaign contribution to a referendum to support education. But the important thing here is that I was not charged with receiving a single penny. Governor McDonnell, on the other hand, in Virginia, admitted to taking over $175,000 in gifts and loans, a new Rolex watch, and a use of a Ferrari, and he didn't serve a day in prison.
So let's clarify this $500,000 in donations, then, Governor. Where did that money go? To your campaign? To what? Explain.
No, it was to a referendum to establish a lottery to benefit public education. This is the first case.
So it had nothing to do with health. This advisory board that Scrushy would sit on, there did seem to be a clear connection there. That was something ancillary to his business. This had nothing to do with that.
Well, I appointed him to the board subsequent to the contribution, so they made it out like the contribution was in exchange for the appointment. But the important thing here is that this could happen to any governor or any president. It could happen to could have happened to President Obama, or could happen to President Trump. This is why I asked President Obama to pardon me, and this is why President Trump should pardon me, because if it can happen to me...
What would the pardon do, Governor? And as you know, he's looking at pardoning Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Arizona. I know there's a very different kind of a case, but does a pardon remove all the stuff that you went through before? It's not going to undo the 7+ years you spent in jail.
No, it's not going to do any of that. It'll clear up the law so that people will understand that you can't go around putting people in prison for something that is clearly not a crime. In my case, it gets more involved because the prosecutor's husband was running my opponent's campaign. The judge had a grudge against me, and because I had caught him earlier trying to pocket $300,000 out of the state retirement system and had embarrassed him. But, this is something that President Obama should have done.
Wasn't the judge later on forced out of office, Governor?
Yeah, he was forced out of office because he was a violent thug. He beat up his wife. He committed 8 violent crimes, was guilty of perjury and lying to police.
So that was the guy who sentenced you. That was the guy who went after you. Now, what I'm curious about is the Supreme Court refused to take up this case. You had a number of state attorneys general who were arguing on your behalf. And now, now people are wondering about what the fallout could be. Your fear, I think, if I get you right, is that this could happen to Republican or Democrat, anyone in power, that because obviously campaigns, governors, senators, they get money. It either comes to the campaign or for initiatives that you oversee. They could be perfectly innocent, but all of a sudden it looks like a pay-to-play deal. So what do you want to see happen?
Well, I think the president needs to clarify this by saying this is not something that we're going to prosecute. If a campaign contribution to President Trump or to a super PAC from someone who ends up as the Secretary of Education doesn't mean that the president has agreed to a bribe, and that's exactly what happened in this case. There was no evidence of an agreement between Richard Scrushy and myself. In fact, the only evidence was that he didn't want to serve on this board. So in order to clear the air and to clarify what should be prosecuted and what shouldn't, the president needs to step in and grant a pardon.
I think that's unlikely, Governor. You know the system better than I do, but I'm wondering if this is still a live and viable issue where anyone can go after any public figure and raise questions about the contributions they're getting, either directly for their campaigns or, in your case, for the state, for any initiative or any undertaking, if it can be turned around against them, and they could deal with what you dealt with.
Well, and that's why we have one legal mechanism left. It's a Freedom of Information Act case that's pending in the Northern District of Alabama, based on the fact that it has been revealed by the Department of Justice itself that my case was politically motivated. They have evidence of the lead prosecutor sending emails to my opponent and his campaign manager and his son, giving them updates on the investigation and their attempt to prosecute.
In other words, in 2004, about that time, you were running for re-election, I believe, but more to the point, you were thought to be a threat as a possible presidential candidate, and that could have stymied George Bush's re-election plans, right? Well,
the Kiplinger letter in 2001 touted me as a dark horse candidate on the Democratic side that could put the South together with the historic East Coast and West Coast Democratic states in order to mount a challenge. But the important thing here is that, to me, is that the truth be known. So, I mean, that's why this FOIA case, this Freedom of Information Act, is so important. And you know, yes, it would be helpful if President Trump stepped in and said, you know, this is wrong and it needs to be corrected.
That's not going to happen, Governor. Well, as I said at the outset, though, I'm not being facetious, is normally you look for, you know, a big old suitcase full of cash that would catch you in the act or something. There was no suitcase, there was no cash, so I found the whole thing weird.